Well, Spain's expansion is still well above the Eurozone's overall projected growth rate of 1.1% this year. So is Spain actually doing quite well considering? Well, to discuss that and more, Luis Alvarez-Castro joins us. He's a professor of Spanish at the University of Florida. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the politics first. We saw that Spain's governing Socialist Party ruled out a grand coalition with the rival PP party after failing to secure a majority. What happens now?
Well, when we look at the numbers, it would seem that the political landscape or the representation in the parliament is even more complex than it was after the April elections. However, the underlying predicament remains the same in that the Socialist Party is the only one who could reach a majority, assuming that it can reach the necessary alliances. The Popular Party, despite the increases in the results, would far below the majority.
Now, given what's been happening since the global financial crisis there, and obviously as we saw the rise of the right-wing Vox party, just how significant is this election?
It is definitely significant. For once, it's the fourth time that the Spaniards were called to the voting polls in 4 years. And what is signaling is that the people is not necessarily pleased with the existing parties. In fact, political parties and politicians in general are listed as the second top concern for the Spanish society, according to the Center for Sociological Investigations.
And you tapped on one of the concerns. What else would you say was really on the minds of voters as they cast their ballots in this latest election?
Well, going back to this governmental agency, which is the Center for Sociological Research, they list the top 5 concerns for the Spanish people, and that would be, first of all, unemployment, then politicians, then economy, then political corruption, and lastly, healthcare. So all those things were not necessarily well represented in the political campaigns because for this last election, the main concern was who is going to be able to form a stable government.
So when you have this more fragmented political landscape, how do the parties' plans for the economy differ from each other?
Again, going back to this last election, the talk about the economy was not necessarily the main point for these parties, but you can see a very clear divide between the left bloc and the right bloc. The left bloc, starting with the Socialist Party, they were talking about securing public pensions, they were talking about increasing salaries for public employees. Then the second major party on the left, United We Can, that would be the translation, they were talking about reducing the work week from 5 days to 4 days. So they were definitely trying to advance some progressive measures. On the other side, right bloc, the sort of typical discourse about lowering taxes. But again, the economy was not necessarily the main discourse in this last political campaign.
Right, and we know that people do tend to make a lot of promises during the election cycle. Of the ones that are most significant to Spain, which ones do you think could realistically get implemented?
Well, the problem with the promises on the side of the left was that Pedro Sanchez or the Socialist Party in general, they never said how they would pay for those measures. They never said how they would pay for those raises for public employees. At least United We Can, they are more honest about it, and they said, yes, we need to increase taxes at least for some part of the population.
Now, I'm sure the rest of the EU bloc is also wondering what's happening with Spain. So how would you characterize the current state of Spain's economy?
Well, as you were mentioning in the intro, some of the figures, some of the projections for the growth of Spanish economy have been downgraded. However, it's a very low difference. It's basically 0.1%, and Spain is still overperforming the average of the Eurozone. Of course, remains to be seen whether this political gridlock, if it's something that continues, will definitely impact the economy even further.
And to that point, do we know how much it's impacted the economy so far, as well as the rest of the bloc? What should we be keeping an eye on?
Of course, both things are happening and taking a toll in Spain's economy. So that downgrading of 0.1% at this point is more a result of the global situation, not necessarily the Spanish politics. But again, if this situation politically continues in the coming months or in the coming year, definitely we would see a larger impact on the economy.
And just quickly, as we do the math in terms of who the majority party would really need to secure that grand majority, who should we be looking at?
Well, to me, the biggest sort of takeout of the election was precisely the crisis in the Citizens' Party. That party held the key for a government in April, but they refused to make an alliance with Pedro Sanchez, and probably voters punished them because of that. Now that the leader is out, he stepped down today, we don't know what the next leadership will do, and even though they only have 10 seats in parliament, that could be enough for the Socialist Party plus United We Can, to form a stable government.
All right, well, thank you so much for your insights. Professor Luis Alvarez-Castro there from the University of Florida.